Good morning. First, let me compliment Sasha for the excellent organization, like always. It was at the beginning a group that was working on, but now it's Sasha actually doing this job. I'm his and besides, I want also to apologize for not being with you yesterday, but unfortunately I had a scheduled check-up with my cardiologist, so I think that it was worthy of attending, as I heard. If we can already find out nothing about death, that is, nothing about what death is, perhaps we can find out more about what death is not. That is, what dead body lacks in order to be alive. Measuring the difference in body weight before and after death did not prove too encouraging. As much as some looked forward to defining the weight of the soul, like Duncan McDougall, for instance, who claimed in 1907 that it was 21.3 grams. Given that the medulla oblongata supervises the work of the heart and breathing, as well as that several other higher centers are characterized by spontaneous activity, for example, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, physiology after the 1950s redefined our understanding of that toward 30 minutes of irreversible silence that is straight line in the electroencephalographic record, which phenomenologically implies the absence of heartbeat, breathing, reflexes with sources in the brainstem and consciousness. There are differences in concepts between individual schools, regulatory bodies, and countries. For example, in the United States, the death of the entire brain is required, albeit with the possibility of persistence of neuroendocrine function, while in the UK, shutting down the brain stem is considered sufficient. One of the most curious phenomena is the gamma burst after cardiac arrest that indicates a two-way communication between the heart and brain of the dying, until recently unknown, attributed to arousal due to lack of oxygen. With these obviously very modest premises, it is no wonder that many scientific and non-scientific thinkers succumbed to the charm of the so-called near-death experience, NDE, and the hope that this phenomenon, even partially, will illuminate literally dying. Described in individuals who experience clinical death, Beda, the venerable 8th century, Pierre de Jean de Monchaux, 18th century, Victor Eger in the 1890s, Celia Green and Elizabeth Kübler-Ross in the 1960s, and so on. The phenomenon was named after and by and owes popularity largely due thanks to John Lilly and Raymond Moody in the 1970s. Among those who imposed the topic of NDE in the scientific literature, psychiatrist Bruce Grayson from the University of Virginia played the greatest role, also compiling a widely accepted questionnaire. A classic NDE includes, according to the memory of those who experienced it, a feeling of happiness, positive emotions, euphoria, uniting with the universe, coming out of one's own body, out-of-body experience, passing through a tunnel of the light, a retrospective of one's own life and possibly other elements, which Moody reformulated as 9 and Kenneth Ring as 5 successive steps: peace, separation of the body, entry into darkness, light, new level of existence, while others, like Charlotte Marchal, denied the existence of any particular order. Equally interesting is the phenomenon of frequent changes in the personality of those who have gone through the NDE, which includes optimism, spirituality, giving up atheism, loss of fear of death. For example, Ernest Hemingway wrote, "Dying is a very simple thing," after just such an experience, and the like. In a smaller number of cases, nevertheless, the NDE can turn out to be terrifyingly negative. The fact that NDE happens to both believers and atheists, as well as to children, confirms that it is a phenomenon that is not imaginary. Of course, the objectivity of science described by those who have experienced NDEs may also be the result of widespread cultural patterns, but this is a less likely route than the reverse influence. Just as it is an exaggeration to speak of millions of people who have experienced it, and that is only in the United States, as they say, and even perhaps about 10% of those who experience cardiac arrest, or 17% of those who almost die, quote, unquote. So it turned out to be exaggerated to believe that the phenomenon will tell us something about dying. After the past half-century, dozens of studies have attempted to define the NDE more precisely and to discover how close to that it really is. Each of these studies can be criticized. The objectivity of observation and self-observation, the influence of personal and social or cultural elements on neurological phenomena, the scarcity of the sample, and so on and so on. NDE interpretation models spiritual, transcendental, psychological, depersonalization, dissociation, hallucination, etc., as well as physiological, temporal cortical stimulation, and neurochemical, endorphins, enkephalins, serotonin, etc., may all be correct, but they do not help except by a more detailed description of the phenomenon. Namely, what does it mean for us to discover or to prove that tunnel vision is the result of a reduction in blood supply to the retina, and that light is the result of re-perfusion of consequent bioluminescence in various parts of the brain? Or, for instance, what does it mean that the nucleus accumbens is responsible for the feeling of spirituality, given that it is involved in the processing of motivation, pleasure, and reward? Or that the frontal lobe gives the illusion of time, and that can be seen as a transition into timelessness, according to Lawrence McKinney. So then it is clear that the frontal lobe is involved in the formation of NDEs. The fact that NDE is not reported during NMR or EEG is more interesting, since it could indicate a higher probability of an electrical and less of hypooxygenation background. Michael Marsh goes so far as to consider the NDE as awakening rather than an extinction. That the electrical activity, perhaps the one observed in the gamma spectrum, created by the release of the blockage, is crucial, is also shown by the excellent recall of the NDE, which is called sometimes realer than real, which otherwise would hardly be associated with the state of hypoperfusion. And indeed, it was already Michael Persinger who described NDE-like phenomenon caused by magnetic stimulation of the temporal lobe, the so-called gold helmet that we already mentioned, out-of-body experience, and so on. And Norman Geschwind already wrote about interictal personality changes in temporal epileptics, hyper-religiousness, etc. While the similarities between NDEs and the consumption of psychedelic, among others describing good versus bad trips, are equally well known. All these facts and speculations, however, all phenomenology and its interpretations, are less important. Far more interesting is how neurological phenomena, NDEs, but also syncope, epilepsy, schizophrenia, or ordinary sleep, initiate and inspire our thoughts, or at least the thoughts of some of us, about things we notice or perceive as important, but which otherwise escape us, like death, God, and the like. So, all starts with physiology, or possibly pathophysiology, and from it we build culturally colored interpretations and supplements of scars or missing observations. Involuntary moments become the way to explain demons and witches, NDE, death, and the divine within us. The creativity of the individual, as well as his knowledge of other people's interpretations, result in the fictionalization and embodiment of religion, history, and philosophy. Neurology probably builds culture as much as culture influences or colors neurology, with dreams, hallucinations, visions, etc. One could conclude that the NDE, along with some neurological diseases and conditions involving altered states of consciousness, the consumption of psychedelic substances, historical coincidences, and literary figures, is one of the most significant sources of religion, and then speculate that death is in fact only one irreversibly altered state of consciousness that man cannot comprehend. The phenomena described by those who experience NDEs are so similar to phenomena that we can controllably induce or observe in other states that are likely to have anything to do with death. And everyone agrees that it is a neurological phenomenon, even those who still see NDE as a mystical experience, and the contradictions of NDE in comparison with religious doctrines, especially Christian ones, are numerous. It could be said that religion does not benefit much from the NDE phenomenon. Science also very little, but cultural anthropology serves